These are the headlines we're following at this hour. The death toll in Israel and Gaza rises to 4,000. Israel's prime minister vows to demolish Hamas as his ground offensive looks imminent. U.S. President Joe Biden warns that another Israeli occupation of Gaza will be a big mistake amid escalating fears of wider war with Iran's possible involvement. Meanwhile, with the Israel-Hamas war raising volatility in oil prices amid supply concerns in the Middle East, the South Korean government decides to extend fuel tax cuts until the end of the year. In central Seoul, the stage in front of Gwanghwamun Gate that was demolished during the Japanese colonial rule has been restored, with the King's Path laying in front of the gate brought back to its original shape for the first time in 100 years. Good afternoon. We start with the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The death toll from both sides combined has now surpassed 4,000 as Palestinians residing in the city were told to evacuate south. This as Israel gears up to launch its ground offensive with its prime minister vowing to demolish Hamas. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
The death toll from the armed conflict between Israel and Hamas has surpassed 4,000 as of Sunday. The Palestinian side said the death toll from Israeli bombardment of Gaza reached at least 2,670, while Israel says more than 1,400 Israelis had been killed since fighting began over a week ago. In total, over 13,000 people on both sides have also been injured, including 9,600 in Gaza. Meanwhile, the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon said Sunday that its headquarters was struck by a rocket amid exchanges of fire on the border with Israel. According to the United Nations interim forces in Lebanon, a rocket shell landed on its site in southern Lebanon, and they are working to identify where it originated. No casualties were reported. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of Gaza residents fled their homes in northern Gaza as the Israeli military opened a 3-hour window from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Sunday, in which they said they would not conduct military operations. Israel said it would continue to allow Palestinians to flee Gaza to relocate southward. As Israel's expanded emergency cabinet met for the first time on Sunday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed that Israel is gearing up to demolish Hamas in Gaza. The ministers started off with a moment of silence for the over 1,000 Israelis killed in the recent escalations. Netanyahu said the force of unity sends a clear message to the nation, the enemy, and the world. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, there are growing concerns that the war between Israel and Hamas could escalate into a new Middle East war, with the U.S. acknowledging the possibility of Iran's involvement. U.S. President Joe Biden offered support for Israel but warned that Israeli occupation of Gaza will be a big mistake. Our Shina Young reports.
Ahead of an expected ground operation in the coming days, Iran has warned Israel against regional escalation and signaled its readiness to intervene, citing the occurrence of war crimes in the current conflict.
If the organized war crimes of the fake regime of Israel are not immediately stopped, anything is possible.
The U.S. has also mentioned the possibility of regional escalation. In an interview with CBS News on Sunday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan expressed concern about the potential opening of a second front in the north, as well as Iran becoming involved.
We are concerned. We see a real risk of escalation on the northern border, and we will continue to monitor the situation closely on that northern border.
Also speaking to CBS News on the same day, President Joe Biden expressed support for Israel by emphasizing that Hamas must be eliminated entirely, but added that there must be a path for a Palestinian state. He also warned Israel not to occupy Gaza. Asked if he would support any occupation of Gaza by the U.S. ally, Biden said Israel's occupation of Gaza would be a big mistake, as Hamas doesn't represent all the Palestinian people. In the meantime, according to Reuters, U.S. and Israeli officials are discussing the possibility of Biden visiting Israel soon, following an invitation from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On Saturday, President Biden held successive conversations with authorities in both Israel and Palestine. After a conversation with Netanyahu, Biden reiterated unwavering support for Israel in a social media post. He also emphasized the U.S. commitment to humanitarian efforts for civilian protection and military support. Biden also engaged with the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, where he offered support with urgently needed humanitarian assistance for the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has ordered a second aircraft carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean near Israel to deter Iran or the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah from joining the Israel-Hamas conflict. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group arrived in the region last week. 신하영, Arirang News.
And with the Israel-Hamas war raising volatility in oil prices amid supply concerns in the Middle East, the South Korean government decides to extend fuel tax cuts until the end of the year. Our Moon Hye-ryun has the details.
South Korea will be extending its fuel tax cut until the end of the year amid concerns regarding supply due to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. During an emergency economic meeting on Monday, Finance Minister Chuu stated that the government will prioritize people's livelihoods as the world grapples with economic uncertainties.
We will be making all efforts to stabilize livelihoods and prices by focusing on the management of food and energy prices.
The tax cuts, which were lowered to 25% for gasoline and 37% for diesel in January this year, were initially put in place to help curb inflationary pressure amid rising oil prices. This isn't the first time the government has given an extension. It was extended once back in April and then again in August. The most recent extension was set to expire at the end of this month amid a fall in the country's tax revenues, but the conflict between Israel and Hamas prompted Seoul to extend it further.
Energy and supply chains could be at risk depending on how the conflict develops, and we cannot exclude the possibility of facing difficulties despite global inflation seemingly slowing.
Bloomberg Economics also released a report last Friday forecasting an oil price hike of more than $64 to $150 per barrel should the conflict develop into a war between Israel and Iran. Iran is not only a major source of oil, but it also controls the Strait of Hormuz, through which over a fifth of the world's oil is transported. If Iran blocks this route due to military engagement, a sharp rise in oil prices would be unavoidable. International oil prices surged by around 6% last Friday due to reports that Israeli ground forces were about to be deployed in the Gaza Strip. Chuu said that the South Korean government will remain vigilant in order to respond as quickly as possible to any new situations that may arise. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Top nuclear envoys of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan are set to begin 2 days of talks in Jakarta on Monday, with North Korea issues to top the agenda. South Korea's Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Kim Gun, and his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Sung Kim and Hiroyuki Namatsu, will discuss ways to respond to threats from North Korea, as well as the regime's military cooperation with Russia. Bilateral meetings between the envoys are also planned. The talks come as the White House said Friday it had evidence that North Korea had delivered weapons to Russia last month. South Korea's tech exports continue to show signs of improvement as semiconductor industry last month hit the highest export value of the year. Our An Sung-jin has more.
As South Korea's tech exports in September reached $18.1 billion, according to the Trade Ministry on Monday, the country saw a $7.3 billion trade surplus in ICT trade. Though still showing an on-year decline, tech exports have improved from May, leading to the smallest on-year decline of the year at 13.4% last month. This is mostly due to an improvement in the semiconductor industry, which saw its highest export value this year as inventories cleared out. With semiconductors having a relatively sluggish start to 2023, September's value of exports was the highest of the year so far. Semiconductor exports were still lower than for the same month in the year before, but that on-year decline has decreased to 14.4%, with semiconductor exports standing at around $10 billion as memory and system semiconductors both improved. However, the weak prices of memory chips is slowing their recovery. Meanwhile, the export of displays was in the black for the second consecutive month as OLED exports increased. China takes up nearly half of South Korea's ICT exports, but exports to China were down 22% on-year. Exports to Europe in September decreased by 12.2% on-year, while exports to the U.S. also fell by 18.7%, even though exports of mobile phones saw an increase. ICT exports to Vietnam, meanwhile, saw an increase of 1.9%. Though there are slow signs of recovery in the tech industry, with an overall slowdown in the global economy, exports of mobile phones and computer devices continue to decrease. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The stage in front of Gwanghwamun Gate, the main gate to Seoul's Gyeongbokgung Palace, has been restored its original state. And now people can walk to the palace on the so-called King's Path that's been brought back for the first time in 100 years. This square platform in front of Gwanghwamun Gate in central Seoul used to be where the kings of the Joseon dynasty met the people. The ceremonial stage, known as World that they used to be built in front of major palaces, has been restored to its original state for the first time since it was destroyed during the Japanese colonial rule.
The wall day in Gwanghwamun, which was damaged by Japanese colonialism exactly 100 years ago, was restored. It was finally restored to its full shape.
Perfecting the restoration are the pair of Seosusang, statues of a mythical animal that's believed to have appeared when the king's leadership was respected. And Gwanghwamun Gate, which serves as the main front entrance to Gyeongbokgung Palace, has been given a new signboard with Chinese letters in gold.
I hope this becomes a time to reflect on how hard it is to restore damaged cultural heritage.
Thousands of people gathered at the site to celebrate the restoration of the historical site. The Culture Ministry hopes that what once connected the king and the people to serve as a bridge for the country and foreign visitors. More restoration of the site is expected to follow until 2025. Busan Metropolitan City has released a song of support for the city's 2030 World Expo bid. Busan City on Monday released the official video for Keep Going, featuring K-pop star Chuu and the 2030 Busan Expo global supporters through its official bid website and YouTube channel. Busan's mayor highlighted the song's catchy melody, which is easy for everyone to sing along to. Hosting duties for the 2030 World Expo will be decided at a meeting of the Expo's regulating body in November. 179 nations will vote in a secret ballot, with Busan, Rome, and Riyadh the final candidates being considered. And now the time for robots to patrol our streets for the safety of humans is here. In Sejong City, there's a robot that walks autonomously while monitoring and detecting situations of danger or fire. Ian Jin tells us more.
This four-legged robot approaches with its headlight on. It discovers a man collapsed on the ground and sends live video footage to a nearby device. This artificial intelligence robot is in charge of patrolling the Kumgang pedestrian bridge in Sejong City. It can climb stairs, avoid obstacles in its way, and even find a charging station on its own. A thermal camera and a 360-degree camera have been added to the robot to increase functionality for detecting dangerous situations, including fires. The goal is to build a system where these AI robots send live surveillance footage to the Urban Integrated Information Center from where the city's CCTV network is controlled, so that firefighters and police can respond quickly to any situation.
Existing robots were focused on mobility and autonomous walking, but we've added a function that uses AI data to detect abnormal behaviors like people collapsing and report incidents to the Urban Integrated Information Center.
Patrol robots have been on trial in some communities, but this is the first time that they've been operated by a local government. Sejong City plans to run trial operations this year and introduce additional robots next year after adjusting for any shortcomings.
Understanding it as robots doing things humans can't do or things that are difficult for humans, I think this will play a role in reinforcing human duties while promoting safety.
A world where artificial intelligence robots patrol for the safety of humans is no longer an image of the future, but a reality right now. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
After the record heat in the summer, it seems that we're looking at more extreme weather conditions in the winter as a hole has appeared in Arctic sea ice, and that hole is said to bring cold snaps to the country. Chuu has more.
This graphic shows the thickness of Arctic sea ice over 2 months from June. The closer the color is to blue, it means the ice is thinner. The graphic shows that the color is gradually darkening and spreading toward the center of the Arctic Ocean. This phenomenon of ice thinning to less than 1 meter thick and forming holes is called polar polynya. Polynyas, which occur in the Arctic during the summer, typically occur in coastal areas connected to land. It's unusual for an ice hole to be created in the middle of the sea like this, and its size is at least 10 times the size of existing polynyas.
It's believed that these polynya were formed by the inflow of relatively warm seawater, while sea ice was thinning due to global warming.
The concern is that once a polynya forms, it can lead to the emergence of even larger holes in the Arctic Ocean. Since polynyas supply a substantial amount of heat to the atmosphere, if they persist for an extended period, they can affect abnormal weather patterns.
As the Arctic temperature rises, the jet stream weakens, which can cause very cold Arctic air to flow into mid-latitude regions, including South Korea. This will expose those regions to frigid Arctic air, and they may experience temporary cold spells.
Furthermore, polynyas can impact the Arctic Ocean's ecosystem by exposing more of the sea surface. The research team emphasized the need for continuous monitoring and preparation for not only South Korean waters, but also all oceans around the globe, as polynyas could lead to a reduction in Arctic sea ice if they persist. Chuu, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Afghanistan has been hit by a third earthquake in the space of a week. Save the Children says that at least 4 people were killed in Sunday's quake and around 150 were injured. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the 6.3 magnitude earthquake struck near the city of Herat at a depth of 8 kilometers. Medicine Sans Frontiers says the number of deaths is unlikely to climb as people are on high alert and are sleeping outdoors. It comes after an initial earthquake the previous weekend, which the Taliban said killed more than 2,000 people, most of whom were women and children. It also flattened some villages and destroyed several homes. A second earthquake, days later in the same region, triggered landslides that also destroyed dozens of houses. Poland's right-wing populist Law and Justice Party looks set to lose its majority in parliament following national elections over the weekend. Exit polls predict the party will win 36.8% of the vote, but that it won't have enough coalition support to remain in power. Instead, the centrist opposition Civic Coalition Party, with 31.6%, is more likely to form a successful political alliance with smaller parties. According to exit polls, the party has more than 248 of the 460-seat lower house of parliament, giving it enough support to end the sitting government's 8-year rule. This year, elections also included referendums on issues such as raising the retirement age and the number of migrants allowed to enter Poland. Sky gazers across the Americas gathered over the weekend to observe a solar eclipse. Called an annular solar eclipse, the phenomenon occurs when the moon is at its farthest point in its orbit from Earth. The positioning means that the moon cannot block the sun completely, creating a visual ring of fire. It lasts for just a few minutes. The eclipse started on Saturday in the U.S. Pacific Northwest and then crossed over parts of Mexico, Honduras, Colombia, and Brazil. The next eclipse of its kind will take place in October 2024 and will be visible in parts of Chile and Argentina. And finally, Three's Company actor Suzanne Somers has died aged 76. According to her publicist, Somers died peacefully at her home on Sunday, surrounded by family, just a day before her 77th birthday. Her death comes after the actress revealed back in July that she had a recurrence of breast cancer. She had been battling the disease on and off since 2000. Summers is best known for her role as Chrissy Snow in the award-winning sitcom Three's Company and for her later work in Step by Step. Outside of acting, she wrote 25 books on various topics, from diet and nutrition to poetry, and even became a New York Times best-selling author. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. There was a noticeable dip in temperatures over the weekend in central parts of the country. I wish I had a warmer jacket on when I stepped outside this morning. It felt so much colder. A chilly wind dragged down feels-like temperatures even further, and afternoon highs are also a couple of degrees lower than the same time yesterday. And we'll need to brace for an even chillier start tomorrow, perhaps wear a light winter jacket. We're having sunny skies dominating across Korea, except in the East Coast regions, with 5 to 10 millimeters of rainfall expected today. Highs are breezier than Sunday in most places, and the capital area hovering in the upper teens. But as long as you dress well for the weather, it's a good day to spend some time outside today. There will be rain at the end of this week, and look what that rain will bring to the country this weekend. Seoul is forecast to wake up to a low of 4 degrees Celsius, but the weekend's autumn cold snap will be short-lived. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
As Israel gears up for its ground offensive in Gaza, its critical target will be the underground tunnel system operated by Hamas. That includes bunkers, command centers, and weapons. The Israeli troops call the tunnel network the Gaza Metro. CNN reports that it's roughly half the length of the New York City subway system. The tunnels are reminiscent of Al-Qaeda's tunnels in mountains or the Viet Cong's in the jungles, but they are more difficult to deal with because they're below the densely populated urban area, with many residents of Gaza City still remaining despite the evacuation order, while hostages are also believed to be held in the tunnels as human shields. And all of this making Israel's offensive more complicated. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.